All right, so welcome back for our next episode of the last week of Epoch podcast. This is episode 32. I am your host, PerryThePig. You might also know me as some people. Joining me this week is Arborus here. Arborus, hello.
Hello.
And if you are joining us on twitch.tv/PerryThePig, joining us live, you might notice that we have no webcam. We were thinking about jumping into Microsoft Paint and maybe drawing up a little icon for Arborus real quick. But sometimes you just don't quite have a webcam, and sometimes you don't have a logo. So it's fine. So Arborus, welcome. What's going on?
Not a whole lot.
Is this? I think this is your first time on the podcast. Is that true?
Yeah.
Ooh.
Yep.
So what are you up to these days? I got a whole bunch of questions for you, but first I just got to know how you doing.
Honestly, not up to that much. Really, just waiting for the next last Epoch patch. Kind of achieved all of the goals I wanted to achieve in the current patch. So
we're
playing other games.
I hear you. So we're currently on February 15th of 2022. We're waiting, I think, about 1 month, maybe a month and a week, something like that, until the beginning of the next patch, which will be patch 0.8.5. So we're working our way through early access and just kind of waiting for those next 2 dungeons that are going to be dropped when we finally get to 0.8.5. So if this is your first time on the podcast, we got to start out. So one of the stated purposes of this podcast, the last week of Epoch, is to highlight people in the community, highlight builds, highlight events that are going on, help people know what's going on in last Epoch. The game's in early access, but there's still a lot of stuff going on in the community. So I guess first things first, what brought you to last Epoch? How long you been here?
I saw the game mentioned in a Reddit post about 4 years ago now, and that's about it.
Is that the very first Reddit post where someone's like, I'm gonna go make my own action RPG with?
I think it just got mentioned kind of offhand, and yeah, I was like, oh, that sounds interesting. I'm kind of bored of the current Path of Exile League. I've tried a bunch of other ARPGs that are on the market. I'll look this up and check out the demo, and yeah, they had like a free demo if you join their Discord server. So
This guy got it free. I had to pay money for this.
I ended up playing a whole bunch of it, and then they did a Kickstarter. I backed it on Kickstarter, and I've been playing it ever since.
All right. So I did say we try to highlight people in the community, and I know you. People here in Twitch chat might know you as well. If somebody is not here in Twitch chat joining us live, why might someone know who you are? What have you done in the community?
I answer a lot of questions in Discord. People post questions in the ask the community or whatever, or in the Rogue or Acolyte channels. I'm pretty much camping those channels. So I talk a lot in those, answer a lot of questions. Otherwise, I have, I guess, put out a few build guides via Dread, Epoch builds on YouTube. Stuff like Poison Lich that was disgustingly broken and then now doesn't really exist anymore. Stuff like Dot Flurry on Blade Dancer that is disgustingly broken and hopefully won't exist anymore in the next patch. That kind of stuff. I guess I feel I like to abuse poison.
I wanted to make sure that we highlighted those 2 builds because when I think about Arborus and I say like, why might someone know who you are? It's like Poison Lich having some kind of wandering or the wandering spirits or like the spirit plague stuff, and you transitioned over to necrotic damage later. That's like a super iconic build. It's the kind of build that even if you don't play Last Epoch, you might still have heard of this, and you might still have seen somebody playing it offhand if you tune into a stream or turn into a YouTube at some point. So those 2 builds, the Poison Lich and the like Poison or Bleed melee channeled Shockwave Flurry, those builds are disgusting. And there's so much more damage than any of the fair things that you would see other builds doing. So I had a topic that I wanted to discuss with you today, and we can make a roundabout way into any kind of topic if you want to. But I wanted to ask you questions about finding the OP. And that's the sentence that I'm trying to choose. Like finding what's the next busted thing that's going to happen after, Poison Lich gets nerfed, and then Wandering Spirits got changed, and then we have melee channeled Flurry. And I tell people that there's screenshots floating around of people like you, of Arborus, dealing 40 million dot DPS against the dummy. And it's like, well, maybe that's too high. Maybe.
Yeah,
And one, like,
possibly.
maybe it's too high. We start, you are one of a small handful of people I know in the last Epoch community who measure your tier 4 dungeon kills in seconds. You're just not interested in doing anything that takes longer than.
Yeah, that's I guess really I hate doing boss mechanics. I hate the boss being alive. I just want to get the loot and get out, you know. Um,
I asked you about it once. I was asking about using a Bastion of Honor in that build, and you're like, well, when it comes to bosses, you said you had a specific strategy regarding Bastion of Honor.
yeah.
What was that?
So on bosses, you don't need Bastion of Honor because they don't live long enough to do any damage to you. Or anything that they can do, you can manually avoid, like with relative ease. Um, but I find Bastion of Honor really, really useful for monoliths where there's like 50 some enemies swarming around you, and you can't necessarily manually avoid every single thing coming at you in a monolith. And I mean, that's where Bastion of Honor really shines, in my opinion, is just having all the damage you take from the unavoidable or difficult to avoid stuff.
So when it comes to writing off your defense, you get to a boss and you say, like, I don't need more defense. I don't need a Bastion of Honor. I just need the damage to end this fight as soon as possible. What are you looking for when you're poking around builds, when you're poking around patch notes? What are you looking for in order to find a build that deals that level?
I mean, in recent times, basically just, well, for most of the game's existence, really, poison is just a mechanically broken effect. I don't know if there's really any other way to describe it. The kind of non-linear scaling of more poison stacks giving you more shred for even more damage. It's I don't really think there's anything comparable in terms of single target damage specifically. Um, yeah, I mean, for the most part, it's just looking for ways to abuse poison stacking, mostly through things that have really ridiculous hit rates that haven't yet gotten an ailment penalty or don't have a correct ailment penalty in the case of Flurry.
Don't have a correct talent flick. So maybe it's just things that are quite literally broken, have even
Yeah,
balance. All right, good. So just, I guess you're just attacking and casting as fast as possible using poison. And I want to make sure that we're all on the same page. Maybe there's a new player out there. So we know that poison has like it has some extra effect to it, right? I think it's the only ailment that has this extra effect tacked on.
yeah. I mean, there are a few like was it Time Wrath that has like the stun chance. Lightning Shock has the stun chance thing, but it's the only one that has like a large damage benefit as its secondary effect.
Well, shock has a cap on it. So shock has a couple of things. It has like chance for an enemy to receive a stun if they're shocked, and then shock can stack. And then it also lowers the enemy's lightning resistance.
Yeah.
It's specifically strong for like lightning. But it has a cap at 20 stacks, doesn't it?
hmm
And then poison has a cap of.
Great question.
Good.
Yeah,
So,
I
go
think the
ahead.
Poison Flurry build is getting about 850 to 900 concurrent poison stacks. So
So a small handful of poison stack.
yeah, just a smidge, you know.
Would it still be busted if you only had 100 poison stacks? Is there like any kind of breakpoint there that works out in the math?
I don't know about any breakpoint, but I think it would definitely still be. They could nerf it a lot, and would still be really, really good. Um, yeah, I they could nerf the shred to like 1% per stack, which is 1/5 of what it is now, I think, and that would still be ridiculous.
Just even thinking about that. I want to make sure that that people who are like tuning in on Spotify, maybe watching on YouTube, remember if you ever have something that says increased effective poison or increased poison effectiveness, something like aspect of the Viper, if you're playing a Beastmaster build, that increased effective poison, it not only is a more multiplier to the base damage itself, but it also multiplies, the shred that we're talking about. So instead of shredding, is it 3 or 5 by default?
It's 5 on normal enemies, and I believe 3 on bosses.
So
Maybe 2
that
on bosses?
that shred there is multiplied by the increased effectiveness of poison that you can get from other things.
Yeah, which in the case of Blade Dancer is basically only Salt the Wound, which, I personally am not using yet. I do not have good enough gear to make Salt the Wound better than Wing Guards at the moment. But,
Wow, really? Just for
yeah,
attack speed?
yeah,
Cool. Okay,
yeah,
okay. What about
uh,
Ravenous Void? Are like I know we want to dual wield. We don't want to use a Bastion of Honor. Are you a Ravenous Void user, or are you still going to use your Wing Guards against a boss?
if I was going to push, like, higher corruption, I would 100% put Ravenous Wood on. They're, in terms of defense, nothing comparable, broken item. If you have them, wear them. Uh, yeah, if you could get legendary ones with attack speed, I don't think you would
Stop.
ever
Just
take them
stop.
off.
Stop talking about legendary Ravenous
I,
Void.
I, I want a dream, you know. I have a
Yeah,
dream
yeah.
of attack T7 attack speed Ravenous Voids.
All right, so listen, we do this podcast once a week, and last week we were talking to Lizard IRL, and he was telling us about how gearing, in his opinion, gearing doesn't matter as much as he wants it to. So getting something like attack speed on your Ravenous Void, like it looks good, it feels good, but like, is that really going to be a differentiating factor in your build, or is that really just going to be like a bigger number that I can take a screenshot?
In terms of completing content, it doesn't matter at all. Like if you have even 1 or 2 million dot DPS, you're just going to cruise through the vast majority of content in the game. Um, I don't think something like T4 Jewelra, I don't think actually lives long enough to get to the max poison damage on it. Um, yeah, it's kind of ridiculous. If you really scale the damage to the max, it's vastly overkill, and until you're into the probably like 1,000 plus corruption range, you're just gonna delete Oribus before it even matters. You know, like.
Interesting. I'm thinking about all the times that I've struggled to deal content or to deal damage to content when I'm doing my weekend characters. I guess this is kind of the thing that you get when you're playing a character for more than just 3 or 4 days.
Yeah, I mean, I've started a few kind of what you got like solo blade dance characters to kind of see what the progression is like.
Okay.
Um, and I find even on those, you need almost nothing to just delete bosses at the lower corruptions, like 100, 150 corruption. You could do that in like white weapons with like a blue chest and helmet almost.
So when we're looking for like the next busted build, like let's say that this melee channeled shockwave flurry finally gets nerfed, they put an appropriate damage penalty on it, and you're out there looking for like the next poison build because you like poison, you've said.
Yeah.
Are you looking for something that just like has a lot or like has like a multi-hit or a multi-cast component in the skill itself? Are you looking for something that like synergizes with a particular item? Like you really like using what's the amulet that I'm thinking of? The poison minion amulet that applies
Oh,
poison
serpent
stacks.
milk.
Like is that the kind of synergy you're looking for? Are you looking like in the skill trees themselves? How do you find it?
Um, so for the most part, for poison especially, it's 100% about hit rate, how fast you can apply poisons. Um, if I was looking for the next OP poison build, I would immediately be thinking Beastmaster, Druid, Spriggan. Um, they're whatever. Not the Veil Blast got changed. Was it like
Uh,
Spirit Thorns or something now?
Spirit thorns, yep.
Yeah, and I know people have done poison versions of that build, but I don't know if I've seen people like push it to quite the extreme that I have in mind. It's definitely a build that I would like to put some time into and kind of see how much damage it can put out because especially as Beastmaster, aspect of the Viper giving you so much poison effect is, I mean, I imagine it has to make up a pretty good chunk of the like lesser hit rate compared to Flurry or Wandering Spirits, which are hitting something like 17 times per second or something. Um, yeah, the I don't know off the top of my head how fast you can get Spirit Thorns to hit, but that would be the first thing that would come to my mind for something that is a potentially broken build in the next patch if it isn't addressed beforehand.
So I'm picking my jaw up off the ground as I'm just thinking about how much more attack speed that is than the kinds of builds that I've been playing during the weekend tournaments. I played the marksman tournament this past weekend, and I played Hail of Arrows for the very first time, which is something that I know community person Tunk loves playing. Tunk from tunklab.com. And during that, we were kind of talking about what if we could use like poison Hail of Arrows, use poison Hail of Arrows along with like the poison HOA bow, and then the bleed quiver, and you're converting these things. And I figured out, I guess I read, but Hail of Arrows, when you convert it to poison, it's dealing poison damage, but it's not actually poison stacks itself. So it doesn't take advantage of the entire benefit of being poison, which is like the stacking debuff of applying all of these things over and over.
Yeah, the poison hail of arrows is another thing that I've kind of looked at in the past, and it's just you can't get the application rate, I think, for it to really take off and kind of scale to the moon like Flurry does.
Well,
Um,
it's hard scaled, or it's hard coded to be fair
yeah,
because it applies like one poison per second or like two poisons per second. And you're talking about builds that have 600% chance to poison on hit and hit 20 times a second. Like you're
yeah,
talking about builds that apply 200 poisons over a second or two, as opposed to one poison a second.
and
Well,
this concept of like things that are hard limited in their application rate is exactly why I have been campaigning against Aura of Decay for so long, and why I think Aura of Decay is an awful skill if you're trying to poison with it.
you know what? Tell me about it. Why is Aura of Decay bad if I'm trying to deal damage to enemies using the AoE around my character? Why is it bad?
Because at most you're going to get, I think, 12 poisons a second baseline, and then it inherits, I want to say, 15% of your poison chance as chance to poison per second. And on a lich, you're going to be pretty hard pressed to get more than about 750% poison chance. So you're really not getting that much. You're maybe at most, let's say, 30 stacks per second. And if you have 700% poison chance,
That's a
uh,
lot of investment.
yeah, that's a lot of investment. And then you have to consider what other skills you can use that can apply poison. And if you're looking at something like Rip Blood that hits 3 times per cast because it's one hit and then two blood splatters.
Well, technically they don't shotgun, so it's only 2 hits per cast.
You know,
Well,
either way, you can get a bunch of cast speed. You can scale the application rate. You've got things like was it Hungering Spirits that do more dot damage in their tree. Um, you've got all sorts of options that give you multiple what do you call it, angles, vectors to scale your poison. Whereas if you're using something like Ore of Decay, your only ways to scale it are poison effect, which you can get by stacking intelligence. Ore of Decay has that specific intelligence scaler, or you can get like increased dot damage and increased poison chance. But you're missing out on like the entire angle that is increased cast or attack speed. So
I'm thinking about the ailments that exist in Last Epoch right now. So we have poison, which has this additional tacked on benefit of shredding poison res. We have shock, which doesn't deal damage itself, but it does shred up to 20 stack. And then we have like the other damaging ailments. I guess Time Rot doesn't really have an extra effect. Ignite doesn't have an extra effect. Bleed doesn't have an extra effect. They have slightly more upfront damage, and like poison has a relatively low actual damage amount. It just happens to have the shred as well. Do we need other ailments in the game to get buffed to have those extra effects in order to compete with poison?
I mean, I don't know if we need them. Well, I also don't
Oh,
know if other things should compete with poison. I really
yeah,
feel like poison should
that's a
probably
good
get
point.
taken
Good point. All
down.
right.
Yeah, I really feel the poison should get taken down a few, or quite a lot of pegs. In fact, you know, there. Yeah, I think poison is just way, way too far above everything else. Um, I feel like more like secondary effects would definitely be interesting. It would be cool. It would be nice to have like kind of an additional thing to scale with like increased ignite or increased bleed effect.
Mm-hmm.
Um I'm not I mean, I have no idea what those could possibly be that would be balanced or anything, but
You should have more physical damage taken per bleed stack on you. Yeah.
yeah, I mean, I was thinking, bleed. If bleed added, say, flat fizz per stack, that would be an interesting kind of hybrid build, possibly, right?
Maybe it slows them down. Maybe we borrow maim from Path of Exiles, like
Oh
makes it
yeah,
move slower. Sure, could be a thing. Could be a thing.
I feel like there's a lot of directions they could go with trying to balance ailments. I'm not sure what EHG is going to do. Um, I would really hope that they just nerf poison as a mechanic rather than nerfing all the builds that use poison to not feel good, but we'll see.
It's an excellent perspective. Nerf poison instead of just nerfing every skill that can be used with poison. I
Yeah.
like that. It's a good perspective.
Yeah, I kind of feel like it's the same issues that Shadow Daggers has had on Blade Dancer, where Shadow Daggers is just a absolutely disgusting broken damage mechanic, and instead of toning it down, though they have toned it down a bit, they have instead nerfed the ways to apply Shadow Daggers, and that has led to kind of those builds not feeling good to play. And I really dislike that way of nerfing it.
So you'd like to see like the damage toned down instead of just, hey, let's make this clunky so no one wants to put up with it.
Exactly.
So I want to make sure if we have some new players out there who like maybe they've heard about Shadow Daggers, they've seen some one shot montages of how cool it is. Can you help us understand like why Shadow Daggers are so busted? What's going down or under the hood there?
So Shadow Daggers has pretty solid base damage. I want to say it's like 80 or 90 now. I think it's been nerfed a bit. It used to be 100. And I think they have like 500% damage effectiveness, and they always crit, and they scale with both melee and throwing modifiers, like flat damage. So it gets a little bit of everything and has insane scaling too.
The way you describe that feels like the way that I've been learning about Hail of Arrows. Like Hail of Arrows has this duration thing. It deals more damage per duration. You get more duration. It has 300% effectiveness added damage. You can use elemental arrows. You can use these other things. Everything kind of just like synergizes a little bit too well for it. And Shadow Daggers, they're kind of like the same thing. They have good base damage. They also scale off the base damage of your weapon, whether it's a melee weapon. They scale off of percent increased damages for melee and for throwing. They scale off of both of those for like crit multi as well. It's like everything works out a little bit too well. Like why is it all so synergistic?
Yeah, I feel like there's a lot of builds, you have what would you call it, like item slots where you can still get some increased damage, but you can't get like a really, really strong modifier for your build. Like throwing skills generally can't get that much out of their weapons, right? Or um, I don't know. A lot of builds don't get that much out of rings because it's just increased damage or attributes. While uh, Shadow Daggers gets its weapons, its rings, its amulet, the head and body, all of its idols all have really, really strong scaling modifiers. We had flat damage and Shadow Dagger effect, and throwing crit multi on things like Laraka's Claws. Um, yeah, it's just it has way too many slots that give it too much scaling in terms of value. I feel.
And it's funny, we were just talking about poison effect and how poison effect would be it's not only a more multiplier for your damage in terms of like numerical value, but it also scales that extra shred component that is, stapled onto poison. So for Shadow Dagger effect, this is something that I had to learn the hard way, or I guess I had to have it explained to me before I figured it out. More damage, like Shadow Dagger effect, I guess any ailment effect is flat damage for your build. But to be more specific, it's a more multiplier of your flat damage, which for something like Ignite, you can't really get Ignite flat damage. Ignite flat damage is called the Ignite effect. But for Shadow Dagger damage, Shadow Daggers have a base value, the same way that Ignite has a base value and Poison has a base value. But Shadow Dagger base damage is also ring prefixes and is also your weapon damage if you're holding a two-handed Odachi. It's like there's a lot of access to all the different more multipliers that you can get for Shadow Dagger. Like again, everything just works out a little bit too well.
Exactly. And that's kind of like why I'm surprised that they haven't toned down some of the scaling ability of Shadow Daggers, like reducing the amount of Shadow Dagger effect you can get, though I believe they did tone it down a bit since the Rogue was released. They, haven't really hit the added damage effectiveness of Shadow Daggers, which is, I think, one of the highest in the game.
I think it's 450% effectiveness of added damage.
It's
way
really
too
high.
big.
Yeah, really, really high. And on top of that added damage effectiveness, it has insane access to added damage because of rings, amulet, weapons. It's just got yeah, like I'm surprised that they haven't nerfed it and instead have nerfed things like Shadow Cascade being able to apply it or Smoke Bomb being able to apply it, because I didn't feel like the application rate, other than Umbral Blades, which we can.
Which is new and came after all of these other conversations.
Yeah, they nerfed the application rate of all of these other skills and then added Umbral Blades that applies it faster than any of those ever could before they were nerfed. Um, it's I don't know what to say about that. That's interesting to me, but I would really like to see them nerf Shadow Dagger and not the ways that it is applied, because yeah.
So we've been talking about the effect of various ailments. It's funny, this really quickly became like an ailment conversation, like how these things work. When it comes to poison, which I wanna go back to it for a second because you said it's like one of your favorite mechanics in the game. When it comes to poison, if they removed the shred component from poison, would poison be would it feel different than bleed and ignite? And I guess
No,
like does it have to? Does it have to feel different?
I don't think it would feel different. I think it would just be bleed. Uh, yeah, I don't really think there would be any difference in if they did that. I think unless the base damage was scaled to be uh I don't know, like really ridiculous. I think ultimately, in the case of Flurry, Blade Dancer, at least, Bleed would end up being better because there's a lot more access to Bleed effect in the game.
For good reason too, because it doesn't have this extra component staple to it.
Yeah,
There's like
yeah,
the whole structure of Last Epoch is tumbling down. It's like, oh no.
yeah. So
Okay.
because Bleed is not ridiculous nonlinear scaling, it gets easy access to a lot of effect. Uh,
So
Poison, unless you're a Beastmaster, doesn't get that really.
when it comes to let's talk about bleed and ignite for a second. Because bleed and ignite, they have higher base damage, like maybe like about double about the flat damage of poison, but twice as high
Bleed
as the flat.
is, I think, 2.5 times, right? I think Bleed's like 53 base damage, and
Something
Poison's
along those
20.
lines. So one of the big differences between ignite and bleed and poison is that there's hit based physical damage and there's hit based fire damage in the video game. So like poison, there's nothing that you can hit in any with and deal poison. The same way that there's no incoming hit poison damage for your character. So you could play fireball and like the hit damage of the fireball deals fire damage and then also applies an ignite and then also like you have like this double dipping sort of thing here. Is that enough of a differentiator to like separate these two things to make up the difference?
I mean, I don't really think so. I
Are
feel
are
like
are there builds that like you've seen or played? I guess I'm just kind of curious at this point. Have you seen people play like hybrid hit based, dot based, like
uh,
fire hit ignite or like fizz hit bleed?
I've seen people like post their build planners and whatnot, in the Discord asking about it, like, oh, what can I do better? And for the most part, they always seem a bit too like thinly spread. Um, y- Last Epoch, or really, I guess, just ARPGs in general, right, tend to really just encourage and reward specializing and focusing in on scaling one particular thing. A lot of the scaling is, like compounding, right? Like non-linear in a way.
So instead of investing thinly into like two or three different things, we want to go deep on one mechanic and make that as big as
Yeah, it's
okay.
it's something you can do, and I think you could consider it, if you can get your hit damage high enough to like kill the weaker, just normal enemies in something like a monolith. Then I could see value in having that kind of instant smooth clear. You're not having to ramp up any damage, and then you've got the ignite for single target where it has time to build and stack up. um,
So I have another question for you, but first I need to say thank you to Twitch chat. We've got someone here who's doing some fact checking for us about the base damage of each of these ailments. So poison is 20 damage over 3 seconds. So 20. Bleed is 54 over 4 seconds. And ignite is almost double poison. Ignite is 37 over 3 seconds. Got it. Got
okay.
it. So when it comes to comparing bleed and ignite builds, I feel like I've seen a lot more bleed builds than I have ignite builds. Is that is that confirmation bias? Is that true?
No, I think in general bleed is more powerful, and I would assume that just leads to more people wanting to play it, especially, Sentinel has a lot of bleed support. Sentinel is a pretty popular class, I feel. Seems like there's a lot of people that want to play a Sentinel, and yeah, Paladin bleed was, big guides all over YouTube for it. I feel like, people that were coming into the game in like 083, 084, there was tons of like bleed warpath like all over YouTube.
I kind of want to call out one unique item as long as we're so close to this in the conversation. I think about leeching from damage over time. And like Bleeding Heart's good. Bleeding Heart's a lot better now that we have legendary items. But Valdir's Chalice, so flipping good.
Yeah,
The
Valdius Chalice, absolutely ridiculous item.
it makes me want to take my build and make it into a bleed build.
Yeah, there was even a time on the poison flurry build where I'm like, yeah, I'll just slap on a Valdius Chalice and it'll give me all the sustain I need if I'm doing monoliths. Um,
Wow, that's not even a bad idea. I kind of like that.
yeah, and eventually I got to where my like instantaneous like low stack damage was high enough that bleeding heart was enough to carry sustain anyways. But it's really nice having the like instantaneous healing that Valdir's gives you, where a mob dies and you just heal like 700 800 plus HP.
It's so good. It's giving me flashbacks to the weekend tournaments where I've played bleed characters and I'm running for my life trying to get 50 more waves to get in first place. And it's just like, zoop, just like your health is going all the way down, boop, and it goes all the way back up because of how strong Valdir's is for sustain, especially in arena.
Hmm.
So here's a question for you then. We talked about one of the big differences in how the build feels and how it kind of plays for single target and for clear. For the stacking ailment that has like low base damage, but it ramps up a lot on single with poison, as opposed to like bleed and ignite builds. So I guess here's a question for you. What about bleed and ignite? Should they be more different? Do they feel different in any way?
I personally don't think they're very different. Um, I mean, obviously, certain classes have access to one or the other or both if they're Sentinel. Um, I, I mean, I personally feel like Ignite is just in a really bad spot at the moment, not just because of its base damage, but just it has a lot of things that have are not in its favor in terms of like gearing, blessings, um, you know, sources of ignite chance. I feel like yeah, it's gotten the short end of the stick in the way a lot of things have been lined up in terms of the game's like design at the moment.
So now that we have legendary items in the game, we can take weird looking, uniques, rings, amulets, soul fire, a relic that does something with a 160 ignite chance for fire skills. There's some weird things that you can make work now that we have legendaries in the game. Has that been something that you've been messing around with on any of your builds?
There are definitely some uniques that I am keeping an eye on. Things that I would really like to get LP versions of. Um, I mean, primarily they're bleed and poison uniques. Um, there's also just some like generally powerful stuff that I'm looking into, but the ignite uniques in particular, I don't know, I feel like they're like obviously they give you a lot of ignite chance, but they're typically on like pretty bad item bases as well. Something like pull up the item
I,
database real quick. Something
I
like Soulfire is
Poor
on
Soulfire.
a chance to ignite relic base, which ignite build, cool, more chance to ignite, but you're losing out on if you're a sentinel, something like an Argent Crest giving you like 80-90% resist. Um, if you're a rogue, something like an Antidote Vial giving you 45% poison res and a bunch of leech rate. Um, there are a lot of item implicits that I think are really nice to have in terms of smoothing out suffixes on builds. And a lot of the unique stuff means you're giving those up and you're having to find room for those suffixes elsewhere. So they have to be really, really good, I feel, to take a spot in a build. They need to be doing something that is just like irreplaceable. And Soulfire gives you a lot of ignite chance. If you're a lich or a acolyte in general, I guess you can do the hungering souls thing, which is I don't think particularly appealing, but it's interesting. Um, but I feel like you sacrifice a lot even if you're using legendary versions of these uniques because of the trade-off in implicit stats.
If you're looking at the item database and I'm not, would you look up the fire damage helmet? It's a low level base
Yeah,
because it
well,
has so much good text on it. And it's got like 80% increased damage. It's got like ignite with fire skills on it. And it's the perfect example of what you were just talking about,
yeah,
where legendary items are sweet and their legendary items are so cool. I'm really glad they were added to the game. However, there's a real opportunity cost because you only have two prefixes and two suffixes, and then there's the implicit modifiers that are so incredibly powerful in Last Epoch. Like, just look at a look at the relative value of a bone amulet and having 80 resistances across those two compared to some kind of amulet base in something like Path of Exile. Path of Exile, like you have three prefixes, three suffixes, and the implicits, they're fine, good. But if you end up using a pair of gloves with, less ES or less armor, less evasion in PoE, like sure, it's not perfectly min maxed, but come on, it's still very good based on the text that you have on the item, the explicit modifier. So is it Calamity? Is that the
yeah,
Last Epoch helmet?
yeah. Calamity has up to 80% fire damage, 150 ignite chance, and up to 10% fire cast speed. So
And what's what
basically,
what's the implicit modifier?
it is plus 5 armor, 10 to 35 mana, and 5 to 25% increased spell damage.
Oh, cool.
So you're losing like probably what 70, 80 armor, maybe more.
It's-
Um, you're missing out on, if you're like a sentinel, crit multi or crit avoidance. Um, yeah, there's so many, even like on rare helmets. I feel like there are some really good implicits on a lot of the classes out there, and yeah, giving those up for the ignite chance is, I mean, it's definitely a trade-off. If you're in an ignite build, I feel like you probably want an LP calamity just because I don't know how else you're gonna do damage because it's ignite. But
now the truth finally comes out. I think you need to use this bad item because I don't know how else you're going to get damage. Now, all right, tell me how you really feel, Arbor.
yeah, I mean that's just like the reality for a lot of uniques, right? Is or I guess builds in general is you have to use a bad unique to make it work, and that makes it a bad build.
It's a rough place to be in. So now I'm kind of thinking like how do we get bleed and ignite to feel different? Because I'd like them to. I like the idea of having like the slow rampy play style where even if you have tons of damage, you still feel like poison, like the slow ramping thing, and like you see the damage get bigger and bigger and bigger against a big boss like the like Jewelra in the dungeon.
Yeah, like the target dummy.
And like the target dummy, which apparently can die. Thank you,
Yeah,
Reddit. I appreciate that.
uh, yeah. The poison flurry is killing the dummy in about 15 seconds. Makes it
Wait,
really difficult to test.
whoa, 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 whoa. You can kill the dummy with your build?
Yeah, yeah, it dies way too fast. It's a huge pain to test things on the dummy because it dies too fast.
I thought that was something that only happened with people who were editing their game files. I didn't realize that you could also do that.
I think
Hmm.
any build can like kill the dummy. It's just it has like 10 billion health or something.
You know what? I don't want to give you homework. I don't want to tell you how to live your life, but could you make a clip? I would love to see a clip of you killing the dummy with your poison flurry character.
Yeah, I'll look into
All
setting it up.
right. Awesome. All right, so I guess we've talked about, man, we're kind of working our way through all the list of topics that I've had here. What's on your mind? What have you been I guess what have you been looking forward to in the upcoming patch? So we talked at the very beginning of this podcast, we said like we're currently in patch 084. We're looking for patch 085. Are there skills, items that you're looking for? There's like a lot that we don't know about, but we do know, for example, we're not going to get any new classes. We're not going to get any new masteries, right? Like what are you looking for in the next last Epoch patch?
Uh, I mean, the biggest thing to me is just going to be things to change up kind of the status quo in terms of builds. Um, I mean, that's one of the reasons I didn't put that much time into this patch. I mean, obviously, I farmed a whole bunch, got some legendary stuff, but I didn't play as much as I could have because, I mean, Flurry is still broken. It was broken last patch. I didn't feel the need to try and one up Flurry if it's still in the game. I don't know if there is something that is capable of one upping Flurry, um, but it's if things don't get nerfed or the things that I feel are the most powerful don't get nerfed, it really hurts my motivation to play and explore more. Right? If I don't need to change and I'm trivializing the game content already, uh, I don't feel a need to find something new to
So
trivialize with.
I'm composing my my note here to EHG on the second monitor. You said please make nerfs so that Arborus maintains interest in game. Is
Yeah,
that good? Is that
exactly. Yes.
okay? So
Yes.
send good.
Yeah, and I could you send that to GGG as well? Tell them to just nerf everything in PoE and
Okay, okay. So I spent a portion of my day earlier today. It didn't turn out too well. There were a couple of technical difficulties, but I was planning on playing in the Twitch Rivals thing, and there was going to be like PoE Royale, and I was going to try not to die for as long as possible so that I could later die to Waggle. I thought that would be fun. So I've been playing a little bit of Path of Exile myself. It sounds like you're also playing PoE. What's going on over there?
I played a few days of this league, and I might play more of it. There's just other games that I think are more interesting at the moment. PoE feels like something that will always be there if I want to play it. But you know, things like Lost Ark, I feel are like the new hotness, maybe a bit of a flash in the pan. We'll see what kind of longevity that game has. Um, yeah, there are other things that I would rather play in the meantime, and then if I don't have anything else to do, I can go back to PoE.
And then last question for you. And this might be a short question, it might be a long question. We'll see. When you're jumping out to a different game, we got people in the audience who might also be playing Path of Exile. A lot of people right now who are even playing Lost Ark. What are you approaching those games the same way that you've approached Last Epoch in the past? Are you still looking for like the most busted thing and how to turn the dial up to 11, or are you approaching those games different?
I definitely don't approach PoE the same way, mostly because I feel like the time commitment for PoE is significantly higher than Last Epoch. I don't really want to put that much time into playing something broken. Um, and for the most part, I feel like the things that tend to be really strong in PoE are not things I enjoy playing. Um, I have played PoE for quite a while too, and I definitely went through the phase of, oh, I'm just going to play the strongest boss killer, or you know the strongest build. And now I'm to the point where I just want to play builds that feel nice to play. Um, I am in love with Volatile Dead in Path of Exile. It's you know I play that skill every single league. Have played it every league since it came out. Absolutely love Volatile Dead. And yeah, I just if I could do nothing in PoE but play a really nice feeling Volatile Dead build, that would be enough for me.
I feel so warm and fuzzy now. I think back to the times that I played Volatile Dead, and I played a lot of Devouring Orb here in Last Epoch as well. And there's something so nice about like watching those little like explodey balls like seek out some enemies and blow up the whole pack. It's really a good feeling. I kind of miss Volatile Dead myself.
Yeah, it's a very comfortable kind of, I guess, low effort skill in a way. It auto aims. You don't have to, point at the boss even. It just does its thing.
I wonder if it's Volatile Dead that I miss, or if it's like Herald, because it might just be Heralds that I miss from Path of Exile, and they're pretty flipping satisfying.
Yeah, I mean, in terms of things I wish would be in Last Epoch, it's definitely more on death explosions.
Uh,
Um,
if only.
Herald, yeah, if Last Epoch had a Herald of Ice equivalent, I would probably only be playing that.
Yeah, someday we can hope. All right, well, Arborus, I think we're gonna start to wrap it up here. We're a little bit at the low end, but I think we've covered the topics that we've been looking for. As we start to wrap up, is there anything else in your mind?
Yeah, I actually had a few kind of points to circle back to, like finding the OP and
Oh,
Last
please,
Epoch
please,
real
please,
quick.
yeah.
Just some like quick bullet points, I think, for people to think about if they want to kind of look ahead uh, into the next patch and think about what might be good or what might be worth exploring. So when I'm thinking about builds, I'm always thinking about like what kind of content do I want the build to be good at, and then trying to like kind of hyper focus on that one thing. So if I'm making a build for farming the dungeon, I want something that has pretty decent movement speed to get through the levels, but I don't need to care about clearing the mobs very much. Um, but it needs to have really good single target to kill the boss. If I want to do monoliths, I don't necessarily need to care about boss damage as much, but I want something that will passively kill mobs and has a lot of movement speed. And then once you've kind of figured out what you want to do with a certain build, um, I love to steal ideas from other people. So look at what everyone else has done, see what worked, what didn't work, see what you think can be done better.
I mean,
And
I'm making sure that I'm taking notes on this. Yeah, steel builds. Okay, keep going.
yeah, so like the whole like poison flurry thing came because I saw Dread play a melee bleed flurry build at some point, and I'm like, that looks cool, but I think I can make it way more ridiculous. Or like the poison lich, like I think Lizard or Foe or someone had made a poison lich guide, and I'm like, okay, this looks cool, but I think I can push it to the extreme.
Now, is this a superiority complex that you have? Do you want to talk about this? Do you think you
I
can just do things better than other people?
I don't think so, but I think I like seeing things kind of taken to their logical limit, pushed to the extremes of what they can be, right?
Okay, okay.
Trying to find an idea that I think looks fun or interesting, and then seeing how far I can push it to make it the best it can be.
Okay. I like the sounds of that. So we want movement speed, we want enormous single target damage. I will say there's something about the dungeon that I find myself wanting the more that I'm playing dungeon builds. I was playing this Herald or not Herald. What's it called? The Herald of Agony, Herald of Ash, Hail of Arrows. I was playing a Hail of Arrows HOA build on my marksman this past weekend for the marksman tournament, and it felt it felt pretty good for killing Julra, even tier 4 Julra, but it felt awful for actually like navigating through the dungeon itself. Because anytime that you time shift and all of a sudden it's like, hey, there's a bunch of enemies around me. Like, okay, well, let me put down my smoke bomb and then I'll shift and then I'll wait for uh two shadows to spawn and then I'll shoot my arrows up in the sky and then I'll just stand around and wait for the enemies to die. Like the whole setup of using hail of arrows, even for like, a smaller version of that, it takes so long for the dungeon. And then you need to stand around and wait for the monsters not to chase you and stand in there and die. So I would want something that has like nice immediate damage. Like if I time shift and there's a bunch of enemies next to me, like let's blow these guys up as fast as possible.
Yeah, the like poison flurry I think has felt really nice in that regard because you just tap things with flurry and they kind of die as you run forward. Having I mean, Hail of Arrows in particular, like Tunk's version, I have tried in the past, and I really, really do not like trying to clear monoliths with that build. The big mana cost, the bunch of setup, it just does not feel good to me, even though it's a really, really strong arena build.
I discovered the secret to Tunk's build to playing the Hail of Arrow thing. Um, Normally you get haste by haste on hit from the marksman mastery or from the rogue base mastery. It's the whole thing that ties that build together is decoy, which actually gives you haste, and then you just run assassin playstyle, run past everything, don't kill any monsters, run all the
Yeah,
way to the objective. If last epoch changes at some point and they reward you for killing monsters during the echoes. So right now, you just like run past everything, you do the objective, and you leave as fast as possible so that you can do the next echo. If that changes at some point, if there's a reward for killing monsters, the relative strength of that hail of arrow, cold, damage over time build plummets. It's garbage.
yeah. I mean, that's definitely something that I look at a lot with builds I want to do monoliths with is what kind of passive clearing do they have? Um, because I feel that it is somewhat inevitable that eventually they will make killing mobs and monoliths worth it. And at that point, I want to have a good kind of stable of builds that I can, know will clear decently and quickly, even if I don't just run past everything.
As you're describing this right now, I want you to know that I also miss Wandering Spirits. Oh my
Yeah,
god, they're so good.
Wandering Spirits, Spirit Plague, we're insane for it. I think right now the Entangling Roots, like Cold Dot Werebear, is really, really good in that regard. Devouring Orb, obviously great. Um, yeah, there are a few things, like those kinds of builds that I keep in mind where if being able to kill enemies is more relevant, I definitely want to kind of know what is good. Um, Getting back to the bullet points I was talking about, thinking about what kind of mechanics a build can utilize, right? Like what is strong and how many of these things can I pile into one build, like with relatively low investment? Things like
When you say mechanics, do you just mean poison, or is there something else you're talking
uh
about too?
I mean things like stun. If you're doing like an arena build, right? Stun is really good. Looking at like Earthquake Werebear. Um, Things that deal lightning damage because of shock and the lightning shred blessing being like basically free. Um, Things that hit really fast for ailments. Things that easily get lots of leech. Uh, Classes that get endurance for relatively free via passives or item implicits. Um,
Is there a reason why endurance in particular? Like why not crit avoid for free?
I mean, Crit Avoid is really good for free, but I feel is maybe a bit like less key to get for free. Like if you can get like 35% for free, I feel like that's pretty good. But if you can get, you know, like the endurance gloves plus the blessing would normally cap you. Being able to drop those gloves and not need a suffix slot is pretty nice. Like Druid can get, I think, 14% endurance in its tree. Paladin can get some endurance in its tree. Um, Acolyte can get endurance on its chest implicit. Ways to not need to use a suffix slot if you want to use different gloves than engraved gauntlets.
This conversation came full circle so much better than I thought it was going to. Talking about like implicits being so much more important in Last Epoch compared to a game like Path of Exile. Only having two prefixes, only having two suffixes, wanting endurance for free instead of crit avoid, specifically because endurance is normally a place you get on your glove implicit. So you want to drop the gloves and use Ravenous Void or use something else free instead. Like, whoa, what what a way to wrap it up. All right, I like it.
Yeah, builds that can avoid mana cost or like subvert having to pay mana. Um, so in the past, things like EQ Werebear avoided the like 150 mana cost of Earthquake entirely. Now it basically does the same thing because you get such a absurd rage generation from the vine stuff. Um, Things that don't have to pay the mana cost of things that are normally limited by mana cost.
Things
Um,
things that don't have the mana cost. That reminds me of people who continue to tell me to put Acid Flask on my shift, which is just the worst offender of that. Because when
yeah,
shift uses Acid Flask, you have to pay the mana cost of Acid Flask twice. And it costs so much mana.
yeah, it
Yeah.
costs so
It's,
much.
it's like your entire mana pool is gone. Okay, so you're looking for things that can proc a different skill and not pay the mana for them.
Yeah.
Okay.
Looking at builds that can use the really overpowered uniques with low opportunity cost. So if a build can fit in Ravenous Void and isn't giving up some other really strong glove option like Salt the Wound or Wing Guards or I don't know what other gloves people actually use.
Malin Subris, maybe you're playing some Ignite conversion build.
Yeah. There are a bunch of gloves that are relatively useful, but if you can use Ravenous Void with no trade-off, I mean, that's a big plus for a build, or builds that can use Bastion with no trade-off. Like, if you don't need the spell crit from a catalyst, then you basically get to wear Bastion for free.
Or maybe you're playing some kind of void damage spell build that can instead use a Locket of the Forgotten Knight for the
Yeah,
+3 base crit there. Maybe use a Prismatic Gaze, the new helmet that gives you +4 base crit.
if you have ways to get the stats elsewhere without much of a trade-off, and you can put on the Bastion and not really lose anything, then another massive plus, right? Builds that can, wear those kinds of items, or builds that can, I guess, don't need. Trying to think, like certain chest modifiers. If you can wear like a legendary woven flesh, right? And even if you only have one or two mods on it, if you don't need, you know, whatever other stats you'd be getting on a chest, then your blessing slot and at least one suffix from having to get crit avoidance.
I want to say I'm pretty sure it was you who first planted the seed in my head about using a woven flesh on blade dancers and on marksmen because
Oh,
it's
yeah.
so much easier to gear your suffixes when you don't need to worry about the crit avoidance just by wearing that thing.
Blade Dancer is a really, really great class for that because you get literally nothing from your suffixes. Like in your passive tree, you don't get any resist, any crit avoidance, any endurance. So being able to use a woven flesh, or I mean, if you can get like Julius Path on your boots, then you can even drop the what do you call it? The endurance percent blessing, and you can start getting some really insane like damage out of your blessings. Because if you don't need crit avoidance, then you can get poison chance from Rain of Dragons, which is another 85% poison chance. Or you could get bleed chance. I think you can get leech, melee leech, maybe leech rate.
You
There's a bunch
can get melee leech from Reign of Dragons, not often used, but it exists. It's there.
of yeah, the all resist if you need that. Some of these uniques open up other blessing options from things that are normally like really just locked in blessings.
I like it. So not only the opportunity costs of the implicits using these legendaries, we talked about the opportunity cost of like playing a class that gets a bunch of damage but doesn't necessarily get help on its suffixes from getting free crit avoid or endurance or resistances or at least something to make your gearing process easy. Man, woven flesh. Getting 2 LP on woven flesh, it's so comfy that it's almost best in slot for like every build. 2
Yeah.
LP woven flesh.
And then I guess we talked about this earlier with like things that deal fire damage are at a bit of a disadvantage because they don't have um, blessings with no trade off, right? If you want to get the fire shred blessing, you have to give up endurance percent. Same with like necrotic shred being on the same timeline as endurance percent.
Hmm.
I
You
feel
know
like
that yeah, okay. Yeah, the opportunity cost of just playing the wrong or I guess not wrong, but a different you know, now that we're talking about this, I realized one of the things that I liked so much, I played a like a devotion, smite, mana stacking, lightning damage paladin. I was procking my smites off of hammer throw. And one of the things that was so nice about that is I got to take a lightning shred from Lagan in the ending the storms timeline. And if I hadn't been doing lightning shred there, it's like lightning resistance is like
yeah,
it's the opportunity cost is so small. It's not even necrotic resistance. It's lightning, which is part of elemental, and you're probably using some maybe gold rings or plus elemental resistances or something like that because it gets covered by so many other things. Yeah, okay. The
yeah,
opportunity cost of just picking the wrong man, if I call it the wrong build, people are gonna start
yeah.
sending me hate mail. But
Yeah, it's the opportunity cost of playing a disadvantaged damage type. Um, things like physical and cold have some opportunity cost, but the opportunity cost in the Herot timeline is like not that high. Lightning is super free because really all you've got is like health regen, lightning resist, and mana. And for the most part, the vast majority of builds don't care about really any of those. So
like
lightning damage is
thinking about the Black Sun timeline is a good one. You have health, maybe flat dodge. Maybe the flat dodge could be a bit bigger numerically, but there's also crit multi, spell leech, void res. There's a lot of good things there.
yeah. The Black Sun timeline is I think one of the better balanced ones in terms of trade off. I feel like there is almost everyone wants void res, and there is not that many. I don't think there are any void res implicits that I know of off the top of my head except
There's
glove.
there's there's some gloves that you don't use because Ravenous Void
Yeah.
exists, but okay.
Yeah, the void res gloves that no one uses because you want endurance on your gloves instead,
Right,
basically.
right. Okay.
Um, yeah, but I really like the Black Sun blessing pool. I think it's one of the better balanced ones, really well done. And I feel like Spirits of Fire is one of the worst. I
Well, they have endurance
Yeah,
and
I think
oh, they have
Armor while
armor while
channeling.
memes aside, they have armor while channeling, which is like
Yeah,
750.
yeah,
It's an
it's
absurd
really
source
good.
of flat armor.
I feel like Spirit of Fire is just like so tough because lots of builds want the endurance, because it saves you the two suffix slots on getting endurance elsewhere, basically. And if you're a fire or necrotic build, you kind of just have to suck it up, and you're down two suffixes compared to every other damage build or every other damage type.
Kind of SOL at that point. Interesting. This kind of reminds me of when I was a new player. I guess when I was a new player, and even the advice that I echo to other new players. So I play a lot of not Pathfinder. I play a lot of hardcore in last Epoch. People are like, "Hey, I want to try hardcore for the first time," and I say things like, "It's not that bad. Like you should try it out. It's not as punishing as other games. Like it's not something to be afraid of. It's pretty comfy for hardcore. It's not a particularly difficult game." And like you can see what's going on. You can see the screen. There's not a bunch of particle effects, and there's only so many monsters. So when people say like, "Hey, what should I play?" If they're really, I try not to answer this question. I don't want to tell people what to play. But if people ask me for build recommendations, like literally, just play a paladin.
Yeah,
Paladin,
I mean,
it's like you get a holy aura, you get all of your crit avoid taken care of, you have perfect implicits for all of your items. The gearing process for everything is so smooth. It's like, well, what am I supposed to put on my suffixes? Life.
yeah,
Just go have 5k life. It's great.
like playing a paladin or playing a druid or beastmaster, I always feel like it's just so easy. I have so much more life. I don't have to worry about nearly as many suffix slots or whatever because things are just kind of taken care of.
But thematically, it makes sense that rogues are garbage because EHG doesn't like them. No, because so it kind of works out honestly. Because Rogue is supposed to be like dodging in and out of combat, not supposed to have access to more reduced damage multipliers than anything else. But I do kind of like the theme of Rogue not having resistances, not having endurance, not having crit avoid in the mastery, so that naturally it kind of drags down your life total and it makes it harder to gear, which kind of fits like the squishy, speedy, dodging in and out, smoke bomb, avoid getting hit theme that seems to go along with Rogue and Marksman and Blade.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like it definitely makes sense on Blade Dancer. I mean, they do have a lot of I would say otherwise inaccessible defensive mechanics, things like
Mm-hmm.
glancing blow. I mean, Death's Door, super strong.
Less damage taken while moving as well. There's a lot of
Yeah,
stuff that you can't get on suffixes, but you still need the suffix.
yeah, and I mean, luckily it works out that Blade Dancer ends up being a really relatively tanky character, even without access to that kind of stuff. But it definitely does put a lot of stress on your gear and blessings.
Do you find yourself drawn more to the classes that have a bigger payoff but are harder to gear, or the classes that are like easy to gear and you can just like stack more life on?
I don't know if I necessarily find myself drawn to either, like in particular. It's definitely something to consider if you're, doing just like a short weekend thing, right? But I tend to play characters for, you know, hundreds of hours. And at that point, like, I know I'm just going to end up with whatever I need, really.
Mm-hmm. At that point, like once you get to level 100, once you have all of your resistances and all of your blessings being exactly what they are, and all the right base types, it's kind of the same across each of those.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I feel like for the most part, getting to that point is not particularly challenging for the most part. Um, a lot of things can pretty smoothly kind of progress through the game, even if you don't have, perfect resist or, you know, capped crit avoid might be a bit sketchy at times, but you'll probably be okay. Um, there's a lot of things that you can just kind of, you don't have to have everything perfect, and it'll probably work out.
So I'm gonna work toward wrapping up the podcast. If it goes on for another half hour, listen, but we'll figure it out. I want to know with regard to patch 085, we have 2 new dungeons that are coming our way. We chatted a little bit last week with Lizard IRL when we had him on the podcast as well. The new things that are coming in the next patch. We have 1 dungeon right now. We're about to get 2 new dungeons, and along with those come 2 new like reward mechanisms, reward things. One of them is called the Soul Gambler, and the other one is called the oh man, can I remember it off the top of my head? I think it's the Vault of Uncertain Fate. I believe that's the name of it.
Something like that, yeah.
I want to know what give me the Arborus specialty. Give me the Arborus prediction about what these 2 new mechanisms are going to bring into Last Epoch.
Oh man. So let's see. Soul Gambler. There's got to be some like new currency, maybe a gold sync. That would be great. That will let you gamble. Um, I don't know, some like special like implicit emplacement, maybe like kind of like corrupted implicits or scourge implicits in a way, something that replaces the normal implicits on items.
Kind of taking a page out of Path of Exile. Okay.
Yeah, I feel like that's something that ESG hasn't really explored yet is things that modify implicits, change implicits on items.
Okay, okay. And then what about this Vault of Uncertain Fate? What about that one?
Uncertain fate makes me think it's got to be again something random, like a random outcome in some way. Um, maybe hmm, you put in an item and get a random rarity back out, kind of like orbs of chance in PoE, but being able to pop out like an exalted item of some sort, like maybe it's got some special like higher chance to take an item you put in and drop it back out as an exalted version.
So you're saying that if you wanted a pair of exalted boots, for example, you take some normal boots, you toss them in there, they might come back exalted.
Yeah,
That's not bad. I'm kind of into it. Oh, finally, I can farm exalted boots. Come on, EHG, take notes, please. Write this down.
yeah. I mean, they're just gonna exclude boots because they don't want people to have exalted movement speed. I guess I don't know.
I think it's balanced around softcore. I think the idea is that once you get 1 good pair of boots, you'll just use that on every single character. So the
Uh,
people who play hardcore are just like, I guess I just won't have boots. Okay, thanks.
yeah, I think I've still only found 4 or 5 pairs of exalted movement speed boots so far, and I am saving them for some nice LP legendaries one day, maybe, hopefully.
Someday when trading becomes implemented in the game, I'm just going to go to the market and I'll buy every single pair of movement speed boots. And hopefully nobody will remember this episode and they won't steal my strategy. That's what I need. I wanna sneak in one more closing thought. You mentioned something just a minute ago, and it kind of dinged on a light in my head. So what about Soul Gambler? What about gambling with souls? And a soul would be like, you kill Lagan and you kind of capture his soul, right? You get like your lightning res blessing or your plus mana blessing, your lightning shred blessing. What about you go to the Soul Gambler and you gamble with the blessing? So then all of a sudden, like it gets consumed, something happens, and then you'd have to go back and re-farm up that blessing again.
Hmm. I could see it as like maybe you can trade in like these bosses' souls for maybe higher chance at LP boss drops. Like you farm a whole bunch of Lagan, and you've got 15 Lagan boss souls, and you can go trade them all in, and based on how many boss souls you have, it gives you an increased chance to get LP on the boss unique.
Well, I don't mind this brainstorming session at all. Oh, these are some good ones. I like this. Interesting, interesting. Well, I'll tell you what, I think we are about maybe like an hour and 15 minutes into this podcast. I think this time for real, I'm going to start wrapping up. I want to say for everyone who's joining us live right here in Twitch chat, thank you so much for being here, helping us brainstorm some additional ideas, fact checking the base damage of various ailments. Twitch chat, thank you for being here. I appreciate that. And Arborus, to you, thank you for taking the time out of your day and joining us here on the last week of Epoch too.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
And I guess from all of us here at Last Week of Epoch, we have some people out there who are buying some new cars from themselves and they need some personal time. We have some people who are still taking an extended weekend and enjoying the Valentine's Day that we just had over this past weekend too. So I'm glad that I can be here. And Arborus, I'm glad that I can host a conversation with you as well. So for all of us here at the Last Week of Epoch podcast, chat, thanks for being here. Spotify, YouTube, anyone else out there who is listening to this, thanks for being here as well. We'll see you next time.